This past season has been one of the most disastrous in Los Angeles Lakers history. A campaign that started with championship aspirations ended with the team not even making the play-in tournament. The Lakers will always be near the center of the NBA universe, so their failure this season is as big of a story as some other teams competing deeper into the spring. The rumor mill will undoubtedly be churning on what will happen to the franchise next this summer. The team has already made a move, hiring Darvin Ham to fill the head coaching vacancy after firing Frank Vogel. But as anyone who watched this mess of a team this year knows, much more needs to be done to get the team back into contention. There will undoubtedly be a number of changes this offseason, and boy does their roster need it. As ageless as LeBron James seems at times, time is running out in his career as he will be 38 by next December. The roster around him mostly got older last year, as the Lakers got rid of the few remaining youngish players they had in Alex Caruso and Kyle Kuzma. This was definitely a detriment of both the present and future of the franchise, as the aging veterans they signed to replace them looked absolutely listless in many of their losses, especially on defense. Trying to improve the roster will be a tall task for GM Rob Pelinka and the Lakers front office, especially after trading nearly all their draft capital until 2024 in the Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook trades, and having next to no cap space thanks to Russ, LeBron, and AD's massive salaries. Despite putting themselves behind the 8 ball, there are still some changes the Lakers' brain trust can make in the offseason to help get the franchise back on track. Let's take a look at some of the moves the Lakers could make this offseason to improve their team. Adding a 3-and-D wing. Adding a two-way three-point shooter to the team will undoubtedly be difficult given their lack of spending power, but if they hope to build a competitive team, it will have to be something they find a way to make happen, as last season they were in the bottom third of the league in three-point percentage, and absolutely pathetic on defense. They had really no true 3-and-D players last year after getting rid of Alex Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and it showed. In my opinion, they need at least one, if not 2 or 3 legitimate 3-and-D wings. With both LeBron and Westbrook not being great defenders or off-ball players, they need some high-energy, defensive-minded players to make up for that. But like I mentioned before, they would need to find them for cheap. This could be possible as high-value 3-and-D rotational pieces like Otto Porter, Keldon Johnson, and Grayson Allen all made less than $4 million last year. Also, we have seen many undrafted gems in recent years, such as Max Strus, Alex Caruso, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Gabe Vincent make significant impacts on playoff contending teams for the cheap, so it's not completely impossible for them to find 3-and-D talent with a low salary cap hit. In order for the Lakers to overcome their lack of budget, they will have to be willing to take a flyer on a player or two with clear potential downside and probably get a little lucky too. But they originally signed the valuable Alex Caruso undrafted, so it could happen again. Convince LeBron to sign an extension. Father Time will eventually temper the legend that is LeBron James. Outside of some injury issues, however, it hasn't happened as of yet, and James remains one of the top 5 players in the league. Despite the financial restraints facing the Lakers, offering the extension seems like a certainty. This is a team that revolves around stars and has essentially invested its entire franchise's future into James. They're committed to him, no matter what the cost. Tying James up to that extension will limit the team's ability to be flexible in terms of spending for the next few years. Without him, however, Los Angeles will lack any direction whatsoever and will undoubtedly be forced to enter a complete rebuild like when Kobe retired. It may be important for the Lakers to ink the extension as soon as possible. The longer James waits to sign it, should it be offered, the more leverage he'll have, particularly if he doesn't approve of the offseason moves the Lakers make. James has given no indication he wants to leave Los Angeles, but it's imperative Los Angeles doesn't risk his departure. Bring back Malik Monk. Malik Monk was one of the bright spots for the Lakers last year, averaging a career high in points and being second to only Seth Curry in effective field goal percentage amongst guards during his first season with the team. Bringing him back may not be so simple though. Monk needed to rebuild his reputation after an indefinite suspension from the Hornets prior to the pandemic and playing pretty mediocre in his first couple of seasons. After the Hornets declined to extend a qualifying offer to Monk in the offseason, he signed with the Lakers for just $1.79 million on a 1-year deal. While this was one of the few really good signings the Lakers made recently, there's no doubt that he'll be looking for an improved contract this summer. According to Bleacher Report, polled personnel believe Monk could command between $5 million and $10 million on the open market this summer. That might be too rich for the Lakers' blood, considering that they are way over the cap and will only have a few million to play with. Trade Russell Westbrook, if possible. One could make the argument that the Westbrook trade wasn't as disastrous as portrayed in the media, and his efficiency numbers were pretty close to his career averages throughout the season. However, his production did drop across the board, and the eye test was not good as well. Although he actually somehow averaged the lowest amount of turnovers since his 2013-2014 season, he had some truly horrible lowlights throughout the year, including turnstile defense, top of the backboard clanks, and head-scratching pass decisions that really turned the fan base against him. Regardless of whether the media onslaught against him was deserved or not, the situation has become untenable at this point, and the Lakers don't need the extra distractions of the media circus around him or his lackadaisical play. A change of scenery for Russ is really needed for both him and the Lakers. Of course, it won't be that simple. Westbrook will likely want to collect all the money he's entitled to for his player option for next year, and teams won't exactly be lining up to take on the point guard's contract, which is one of the biggest in the league. There's a better chance of Westbrook winning MVP this season than there is of him declining the option. The usual way that teams get rid of bad contracts is to attach some draft assets or young players in a deal. Unfortunately, as we've already established, the Lakers are more than thin in that department, particularly in terms of this year's draft. Perhaps there is a team in a desperate enough contract situation of its own to pull the trigger. The idea of a swap of Westbrook and John Wall has been floated because there is evidently no limit on the number of times the same players can be dealt for one another, and their salaries are almost identical. It's not clear what kind of production the Lakers could get out of Wall if this trade went through, as he has been racked with injuries the past few seasons and has not played more than 41 games since 2016-2017. On top of that, he chose to sit out the whole last season after being told the Rockets wanted to bring him off the bench. Even though the Rockets traded Westbrook for Wall a few years ago, you would have to think they would rather get something for $47 million than nothing, and maybe Russ would be more open to coming off the bench after his disaster season last year. However, even if Wall provides minimal on-court value, the removal of Westbrook and his negative energy on and off the court will significantly improve the Lakers' morale. So, we all know it's been said many times in the past, but this year it's probably true. This is the most important offseason in recent Lakers history. We'll see if the Lakers front office can get their stuff together and make the moves needed to get back into at least the playoff picture. Do you agree with the points we mentioned? What measures do you think the Lakers need to take in order to come out on top this offseason? Let us know in the comments below.